What's up? It's your boy Carcino here, and this is the truth, the absolute truth behind the Phil Jackson and Jerry Krause beef. Now, let's get into it because I feel that everyone's gonna be like, well, you just copied off the last dance. So let me go ahead and get this out before the last dance hit and everybody talking about I didn't got it from them. Because you know that's coming. That train is always on time. Now, here it is. The Last Dance. It's coming up. And everyone's going crazy over it. Like, I mean, I've never seen something promote. They're promoting this like this is the doggone Avengers. I mean, they got everybody talking about it on every sports show. The Last Dance. This is gonna be great. I'm like, it's all we're gonna be seeing is some footage that, okay, we already know this story or should know this story, but I guess we're gonna see some footage we've never seen before. So that's the big take of it. But I don't know how deep they're gonna get into this. But let's look at the beginning between the beef with Phil Jackson and Jerry Krause. Let's go to the beginning. Now, before Phil Jackson got there, you know, Reinsdorf, who's the owner of the Bulls, he's more of a businessman than he is a basketball savant. He knows about contracts and, the numbers. He's the numbers guy. He really rarely wants to be the guy that's in the middle doing all these things. He know he had to have a basketball in mind in place to run these day-to-day operations. When Rod Thorne, who drafted Michael Jordan, decided it was time to leave, it became very clear that it was just time. It was at a point where it was time for a change. When Krause got there, one of his first things he did was hire Doug Collins to be the coach. He decided we got to change everything. So Krause gets in. He's vice president of operations and GM, whatever. He makes the decisions that affects, the NBA, and he's got talent and experience in dealing with these situations. So this is a team that didn't have a lot of success, so when you're looking at, forsake the eras of what it went down, when they got Doug Collins, that opened the door for a winning attitude to be brought. Here's a guy that won an NBA championship as a player. So you're bringing in a guy that can add something to the team, you know? So you want to actually, encourage that. More than anything, you want to have that guy on your team and definitely bring his knowledge to the game. So, anyway, Doug coming in there, bringing in a system of passion for winning. He's from Illinois. He's from here. The Paul guy, this is like, this is Doug. This is what he went to. He went to Arizona State, did his thing. So when he came through the door, Doug brought a nuance of coaching to a team that really hadn't had any structure. They wasn't used to winning. They're just some guys playing basketball. Lo and behold, he was building teams around him with Tex Winters and Johnny Botch. And there was a coach who was a basketball savant, loved plays, loved to teach, very passionate about winning. And when you saw him, you knew this guy was a winner, played with the Knicks all those years. Phil Jackson, the Zen Master. But back then, he was just known as the quirky X and O's guy who loved his job. So he couldn't get a job coaching in the NBA. He tried. So he ended up in the Puerto Rican Basketball League. He was in Puerto Rico back when Jordan came in there, coaching, and the passion he had for coaching over there. Tried to get hired with the Knicks. They wouldn't even look at him. No NBA team, even the Milwaukee Bucks, who he interviewed for, and they said no, thank you. Losing teams didn't even want Phil Jackson. So it scared off NBA employers because he was mostly a player's coach and wasn't going to seem like he was going to be working well with organization. So in 1987, Jerry Krause hired him to be the head coach under Doug Collins. So in 87, when Phil came along, Tex Winter and him were working on this offense called the triangle offense. And him and Phil are like, they are really IQ with offensive basketball. So Johnny Botch is the defensive guy. His job is to come up with ways to defend. And he was very good at that. I don't think Johnny Botch got a lot of credit for that. Doug was a guy who understood it all. And when you have a great coaching staff in place, now you can focus on winning championships or even advancing to that level. And don't forget, you guys could always donate to the page by hitting up my Cash App, which is Carceno, Karceno. Now, going into the first two seasons as the assistant coach, Doug Collins is having wars with Jerry Krause. You know, going back and forth on getting what they want as far as the players. Jordan would suggest players to Doug. Doug would agree. He would go fight for it. And that was, it just wasn't working out. And in 88, you started to see Doug's influence on them, making the teams, keeping them guys grounded. They were becoming more successful. While Phil was staying low key during this time, him and Jerry Krause stayed in contact more than Doug. So one time Phil had to take over once Doug was suspended a game, and they saw how Phil had command of the team. The players rallied behind Phil, and he could coach. They respected him, And when you see that, even in practice, they could see that Phil had commanding respect over the players like Michael Jordan, Scotty, and that was key. So when Krause was looking, he was looking at that because Doug was going to become a problem because Doug would blow up at times and become too much of the success, too passionate, too much fire. And once they were a 30-win team, they turned into a 50-win team in his third year as head coach. Then he brought the team to the Eastern Conference Finals. The first time they've been there in like 15 years. And then Doug was fired in the summer of 1989. And they were going to give the helm to Phil. They thought Phil is the guy that's going to get us to the top. Now, Michael loved Doug, loved playing for Doug, but Phil was always there, so it was no real change to the system. Now, the only difference was Michael Jordan had told Doug right before they made the decision that next season he didn't want to play point guard anymore. He didn't like playing point. So Doug was like, okay, well, next season you won't have to play point. So it went from that to a firing off a disagreement. Phil Jackson is now the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. And with this happening, he was humble, very quiet, still have the settings of a assistant coach more than a head coach where you have to do public speaking, have to be the face. So it took Phil some time to get used to speaking in the public the way he do in private to the players. But right at offset, he cut out the media. He separated the media from the players, all the access that they used to have, rallying the players to be bonded and close with one another. As to him, this was more important because it was needed to have this continuity not to break. So they lose again in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Detroit Pistons. And as the NBA is going through a new change, Phil and Jerry Krause's relationship is increasing. Now, Michael's relationship with Jerry Krause is definitely losing because Michael is like, look, I am tired of losing, and I'll retire, if we don't get these players that he wanted in there. So Michael would go to Jerry himself instead of going through Phil. He would go through Jerry, but Phil was more of the, I'm with you, Michael, on who we need and your decisions, and let's go. We know who we need to go. He was a player's coach. And then something happened. They won the NBA championship. And very humble and respectfully, Phil won it. Then he won two. Then he won three. And it was like, wow, he's the fastest coach in history to win three titles. Now he's a little bit more comfortable in his position. He's driving motorcycles. He's wearing designer suits now instead of the hand-me-down suits he was wearing before. He's got a little slickness to him now. He's changing. His ego is starting to grow. And he's starting to bite back a little bit with management as far as putting a foot down and being a little bit more authoritative in the meetings. So they started having conversation with Reinsdorf, the owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, is starting to have some reservations about Phil Jackson. He tells Krause, like, I don't think Phil's the same anymore. I think he's changing a bit. And he's like, yeah, well, it's the fame, the winning. When we start losing, people come back down the earth. So Krause was still giving allowances for Phil Jackson. So it wasn't like he hated Phil. This is the guy he hired. This was his pick. So he was still there. So Krause, I mean, Reinsdorf was the first one to really point it out in the meetings. Now, as all of these things are going on, Phil knows he has a contract is getting ready to come up. Michael retires, goes play baseball. Phil is there, and Phil is having a hard time with Scottie Pippen. And the year was 19, I believe, what was it, 95 or 94, 95? And Scottie Pippen is on the trading block. He wants a new deal. He's unhappy with the Bulls. They haven't taken care of him because he signed a contract and they don't want to renegotiate. So he's upset about that. So they're getting ready to try to do a deal to trade for Shawn Kemp and bring Shawn Kemp over to the Chicago Bulls for Scottie Pippen. So now, when all of these things are starting to come out, Michael comes back, saves Scottie's job, and say, "I want to play with Scottie, nobody else." So that was one of the conditions of Michael coming back. Michael wanted to bring some other players in, it wasn't happening. Phil became more resistant and more defiant of Jerry Krause's behavior. He does an interview where he basically has a stogie and he tells the doggone sports media world Jerry Krause really, he makes some decisions, but and he's really good at what he does, but the players and all of these things, it's more than just, you got to have the right guy to get these personalities to blend together. And it was that interview that rubbed Krause really the wrong way, where he thought Phil had just gotten way above his head, and Jerry talked to him in the office very rudely and being very condescending because he was upset of the lack of credit that he was getting in the interview. And that when Krause's name was mentioned, he kind of like, yeah, he got some players, but it's mostly, you got to have someone who can manage all the personality. So it's like he's downplaying what Jerry has done. So Krause is going to feel some sort of way. So as the years were going by, they won. Michael's back. They won the championship again. They were never planning on bringing Phil Jackson back. Even when they won that record game and they won the championship in '96, they saying to themselves, "I don't know about bringing Phil Jackson back. I don't know how long Michael's gonna play. I don't know. There's too many questions here." There are too many questions. We don't know. And this is after '96 when they brought in Rodman. Jerry Krause didn't have to sign Dennis Rodman. They didn't want Dennis Rodman. Phil Jackson wanted Dennis and said, "Look, Dennis could help us." And Phil and Michael and Scottie all agreed, so they brought him in. They got Dennis for cheap. But Jerry had to agree to that. He didn't get any credit for that. They took all the credit for getting Dennis Rodman on the Chicago Bulls and gave Jerry no credit at all. Now, everything's blowing up because two guys who used to be close, like Jerry Krause and everything, like he's actually been to Jerry's house. Jordan, I don't think has ever been to Jerry Krause's house, and I don't think he ever would go. Jordan used to fat shame Jerry Krause. You know, used to call him all kind of names to his face. You know, and they had to send a message, tell Michael that's not right. You know, making fun of Jerry's weight and all of these things. But Michael didn't like him. Now, as this all implodes, Phil and his wife are having problems as well. Jerry Krause's wife and Phil's wife were in contact. So she was crying one time because she didn't show up to they had some type of arrangement where they an engagement or whatever thing where the families were supposed to meet, and the wives are talking, and she's like, I think Phil and his wife's having a divorce, they're gonna get a divorce. She thinks Phil's having an affair. So all of this was going on, and it was like, with whom? She's like, have you heard of the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers daughter? She believes Phil and her are having an affair. And she's telling all this to Jerry Krause. So Jerry Krause is seeing that this is why Phil's having this erratic behavior. Because things in the household is imploding. And this was happening in 97. This is around that time. Where all these rumors and all this stuff was going on back then. They were just keeping it quiet. But Phil was having all kind of marital problems. His attitude had changed. He was really arrogant. He was starting to want to make, more decisions about personnel, and they're like, whoa, 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 you're going way over the line. So Tim Floyd, who was another friend of Jerry Krause, at Iowa State, they were asking him, was he interested in coming to the NBA as a potential candidate if they didn't bring Phil Jackson back. Jerry Krause did not want Phil Jackson back. Jordan backed up that sentiment by telling him, hey, if you don't bring Phil back, I'm not coming back. And this was in the season leading up to the last dance. If you get rid of Phil, I'm not coming back. But Phil was going through so much, he was leaving after the 1-year deal anyway. He knew he was going to get a 1-year deal. He knew it. So in Phil's estimation, it's like, okay, I'm getting a 1-year deal, so screw it. This is the last dance. So it was already cool with Phil that this is it. I don't need nothing else. This is the last dance. But instead of reiterating this to Michael, he didn't tell Michael, hey, Mike, I got some problems at the crib. Me and the wife ain't vibing. I'm going to Cali. I'm getting the hell out of Illinois. I can't be here. Yeah, this divorce finna break me. I'm over here hitting this other chick named Jenny Bush. I'm going to move down there. We're going to go to Montana, get a house, get a ranch. I got big plans. So Phil wanted to be this new Zen master and write books and retire, take some time off, get out of the league. Mike think the Bulls are the reason Phil ain't coming back. Because Jerry Krause said those magic words. I don't care if we go 82-0. Phil Jackson ain't coming back. You are not coming back. Because that's how he felt at the time. So when he made that statement, Phil already knew that, okay, this is my last season. I'm out. So Michael was fighting a losing fight, thinking he's battling for Phil. Mike is a competitive person. So he is always in a fight. So right away, he sees this as a battle, a challenge. And right, he's stepping up to the battle stage and ready to go to war. No, they ain't gonna do this to Phil. That's my coach. So Mike is finna fight tooth and nail. And a fight he don't even know what he's in, why he's in it, The whole nine. Phil was already gone. So when that's said and done, Phil Jackson went and did the unthinkable and said, this is it. We're going to coach this season. And that's that. So before the season, everything kicks off. Here comes this big statement by Jerry Krause that turned everything over and got everybody mad, and they hold it over his head to this day. What his actual quote was, players and coaches alone don't win championship. The front office also wins championship. People took that statement and saying the players don't win the championships. The office, the ownership, and the front office, that's where the championships are won. His quote was misquoted. He was saying players and coaches alone. We got people in the secretary office, they get championship rings, just like the players in the front office, we all get championship rings. So everybody's important is what he was trying to reiterate to the public. That was chopped up to say ownerships win championships, not the players and coaches. The ownership wins it, and that's not what he said. But when you got the media, they took that bite, and the players took that as word of law, and they run with it still to this day. This man said the front office wins championships, not the players on the court. I don't remember secretaries out there shooting doggone jump shots and winning championships in Utah. So everybody hated Jerry Krause. So when it was over, Michael cut his hand anyway and wasn't going to be able to return. Mike would have missed probably 6 months, with that surgery, so he wasn't going to play a lot that season. And what team would they have had? They were definitely not going to pay Scottie Pippen all the money he wanted, so Scottie was gone. Dennis Rodman wasn't coming back. There was no reason to bring back the rest of the team. Now they offered Phil Jackson a contract to come back. They offered Phil a contract to come back to play only after they had already offered the job to Tim Floyd. So to cover it up, to try to make it look like they fought to keep the team because they didn't want the city to turn against them, Reinsdorf says, well, if Phil Jackson doesn't accept the contract after the lockout, we gave him the lockout. If he doesn't accept the contract, Tim Floyd is going to take the job, It's like, how in the world are you going to put Tim Floyd's life on hold and say, well, we're going to wait to see what Phil wants to do, and if he don't want to come back, then we got Tim Floyd. I'm like, so, okay, what if he comes back? Then what happens to Tim Floyd? He's out of a job? It didn't make any sense. A lot of things transpired that just didn't make any sense. Phil was out, and they knew it. Phil wasn't coming back. But I kind of felt he misled Michael and believing that, by not telling what was happening behind the scenes, that he really didn't want to come back. Phil didn't want to come back and coach and keep going. Mike wanted that because Mike still wanted to play. But Phil didn't want it. He wanted to do some other things for a while. Then he come back. He wanted to take his break. Like Mike took his break, Phil wanted to take his break. But he didn't reiterate that to Mike. But he kept telling Mike, no, fight for you. Don't fight for me. He didn't tell him what was going on, but he kept saying, look, don't fight for me. I'm getting out anyway. So I ain't gonna wrestle with Krause. I'm getting out. They don't want me to be a general manager, fine. Well, we saw his general manager work. So, in hindsight, Krause was right. His moves, they won 6 championships. So, got to give Jerry some credit on that. Anyway, I'm out. Thank you for your time. Deuces.